Good afternoon and welcome to the Smoki Museum. My name is Cindy Gresser and I'm the Executive Director here. I'm pleased today to have with us the artists from our recent exhibit, Cultural Connections, Mr. Bill Nebeker, Mr. Doug Hyde. Bill is a cowboy artist and is very well known here in town as well as nationwide. Doug Hyde, Nez Perce, is known nationwide for his wonderful stone and bronze sculptures, and we are so blessed to have had him here and exhibiting for the past 4 months. Today, we're going to have a conversation with the artist and learn a little bit more about each one of them and the work that they do. Bill, you recently won a very prestigious award here in town. Why don't you tell us about your Bucky Award?
Well, yeah, that was a big surprise to me. I didn't even know I was nominated, so it was proud to win the Bucky Award. I'm the second one that has won the award. And we had a big ceremony at the Oaks Theater, which was the first time I had seen it since it's been renovated. It's actually a beautiful place. So it was quite an honor because it was for a lifetime, kind of a lifetime achievement, but also for giving back to the community for as many years as I've lived here.
This is a beautiful sculpture of Doug's. Doug, why don't you tell us about the gift?
The gift is a pink Portuguese marble, and this is more of a traditional piece, an idea to share with other people. This is a talisman, and when he gets visitors to his home, they usually bring him a gift, and he's reciprocating, reaching into the pot there and getting some ahishi necklace to give it to his friends who came to visit.
What first inspired you to start sculpting, Doug?
Actually, I went to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe in 1963 when I was a senior in high school. And at the school, we were allowed to spend 2 weeks in any of the studios. We had jewelry, ceramics, every form of the arts. And as originally going down there as a painter, of course I signed up for the painting class, but I was really fascinated with the sculpture. No more looking at that blank canvas. I had something solid I could walk around and look at and view it from all sides, and so sculpture became my real major.
How did your parents react to that?
They were very happy that I was at the art school, and it was like 1,200 miles from home. So,
Even better.
yeah.
Were they happy that you had got into an art career?
I think they were very happy that I found something that was, gave me a different outlook on life. If I would have stayed there in Idaho, I would either worked at the ammunition plant or the lumber mill, more than likely. So being in the arts, actually in those days, nobody ever thought you could make a living in the arts. So that was another big surprise for them.
What about you, Bill? How did your parents react when you told them you were going to go into an arts career?
My parents supported me from the very get-go. Now, I have never had any formal training in art whatsoever. Maybe people probably say, "Oh, now I know." But from the time I was a young child, always was making things. I wasn't interested in drawing, not much, but I was always hands-on, carving dogs, horses. If I go to a movie and see something, I was home making canoes and sailing boats or whatever it was I hadn't done. My interest was always in getting a hold of something and creating something. And here at school, where we went to school, we didn't really have art classes. It was just crafts class. But we had a famous man that lived here in the area, George Phippen. He was a very well-known artist, painter. He was starting a little bronze foundry. And unfortunately, he got cancer and passed away, but the family was continuing on. So I gave up a $2 an hour job with the Forest Service and went to work for the Phippen family for $1.50 an hour, learning the foundry business. So how I actually learned was from books that Mrs. Phippen showed me that George, buy this book to learn anatomy, animal anatomy, and things of this nature. And of course, the cowboy part of it was part of my heritage. And one thing Doug and I have in common is I'm from Idaho also. I'm from southern Idaho. We moved down here from southern Idaho.
Wow.
So my folks always supported me the whole way, but I never ever actually thought I was going to ever make my living as an artist. I was driven to do something that I was absolutely fascinated with and loved to do.
Tell us about this slide. This is the fallen DPS officers monument.
Yeah, I'm very proud to have done this piece. The main office down in Phoenix, DPS office, one of the guys I graduated from high school with was a motor patrolman. And he actually is the founder of the Make-A-Wish that became world-renowned thing. But they wanted to do something for fallen officers. And they selected me to do a sculpture of an officer standing at ease. And it is, the main office building sets in an L shape, and it's got a beautiful yard in the front of it. And he sits there on a big pedestal. And then there are wings coming off that have bronze plaques and the names of all the officers that have been killed in action. So every May they have a big I think it's May 5th or something, they have a day where they have a big huge ceremony there. And I always go down and wax it and clean it up and make sure it all looks good, but I'm very proud to have done that piece.
This is just beautiful. This is, what's the title of it?
It's called Salmon Run. This also is a pink Portuguese marble piece. I recently got back from up in Idaho at the Nez Perce Reservation, and I was teaching summer classes to tribal elders and 7th and 8th grade kids. And just happened to be there at the perfect time when it was salmon time. So when I got back immediately, I still had salmon on my mind, and that's where the sculpture came from.
What's beautiful, it has really, you can see the movement in the piece. It's really very lovely. Where is this right now, and where is it going?
It is going to be going to the Idle George Museum in Indianapolis for their Quest for the West, which is an invitational art show. This will be in September.
Well, this is a piece I did for the city of Glendale, Arizona. It's on 57th Avenue in Glendale, and they had built a new court complex that had all the offices for a new police station and fire department and the whole thing. And it was a contest that I was involved in, and I did a maquette, a smaller piece, of a territorial sheriff. The strange thing was, it was supposed to be, well, it actually is a ranger, an Arizona Ranger. I was first approached to do an Arizona Ranger. Everybody hears of the Texas Rangers, but a lot of people don't realize that in early Arizona days, they actually had a small group of Arizona Rangers, 26 men. They had a TV series one time called 26 Men, way back in the 50s. But I did a Arizona Ranger, and he is holding a Model 95 Winchester in his left hand, and of course he has a lot of people in the early days, you see the movie westerns of the gear, but a lot of people wore jackets, woolen sport type jackets. And I ended up, with my small piece, I ended up winning the Best of Show and the Gold Sculpture at the Cowboy Artists of America show. And then we did the large one for Glendale, Arizona. Well, to show you how monumental work is with working with cities and committees, there was a man on the city council of Glendale who decided that the face looked like his great-great-grandfather, who was a territorial sheriff in Glendale. So the title of my piece went from Ranger to the Territorial Sheriff.
Coincidentally, the Arizona Rangers now call the Smoki their home. This is where they meet twice a month. So
Is that right?
that's correct.
That's great.
Has there ever been a time in either one of your lives when you didn't want to sculpt?
Well, not that I can think of.
No?
No.
It's your passion.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. Only 7 days a week.
Only 7 days.
I try to equate it to people. People always come up and say, oh, it must be wonderful to have talent to do this. And I have a hard time explaining to you what talent is. Because to me, it is an internal drive that I just have to try and do this. And I equate it to people with, it's learning to play a musical instrument. Some people can play a piano that is masterful. It depends on how much effort you put into it as to how well you get, because the first pieces you do aren't anything like what you do now. Everything is a learning process. Art's wonderful because you can't ever live long enough to learn everything there is to know about being an artist.
True. What do you think inspires you the most, Doug?
It's, I think my inspiration really comes from the material. Like every stone is so different, and they all have a grain in them, just like wood. Different hardnesses, different colors, different sizes. Depending on whether I'm going to be doing something that's going to go outside or a smaller pieces that are going inside, kind of dictates what kind of stone I'm going to work on. But I think my native background also really the feeling that all things are living, and I think that's my main inspiration.
Everything has a story to tell. Tell me about this piece.
This is called Under the Red-tailed Hawk, and it's an alabaster piece. And the idea was to show that not only, well, it's to show all the different tribes, but it also is that the red-tailed hawk is from one end of this country to the other. And so I have a number of different tribes that the red-tailed hawk is flying over. And there again, the stone itself, I have these beautiful colors across the top of it, which looked like wings. And I must have had this stone for 10 years and looked at it before I finally decided what I was going to make out of it. And it started out with the red-tailed hawk itself. And the rest of it grew. I started with the Nez Perce boy that's under his right wing, and then worked around to the different tribes and started doing more symbolism, bears and northwest coast, and under the wings, because the wings created this hollow. In there is a Mesa Verde type dwelling in the back, and this piece was the winning piece at the Quest for the West show this last year, the Patron Choice Award, and I was honored with the Distinguished Artist Award, which means that I have a one-man show in September at the sort of a retrospective of my work at the Island Art Museum.
Nice. Well, it's beautiful and it's striking. Gorgeous. A lot of your pieces seem to have intertribal elements. Why?
I think it really goes back to the early days of the school. The Institute was the first school that I knew of, anyway, that allowed or made you feel at ease to use different tribal symbols, because most everybody wouldn't use their neighboring tribes' things. And what the school did was they would kind of divide the students up into like northwest, southeast, and then each of us would put on dinners showing our food, the type of dwellings we had, the stories we told, the songs, and so everybody got to know a little bit about everybody else. And the next thing you know, the tribal people from different groups were sharing, beadwork colors were changing, and patterns and stuff like that were just, this is, during your early years in high school, when that kind of thing happens to you, when you can see that it really, from the early years of the Institute, and that's where they got their reputation, was everybody was so creative during those first years, and everything was so new, that whole exchange of ideas. And I think I carry it on to this day. And a lot of the tribes, when they have projects, they call on me because they know that I will make a face that looks like their people, not not like the Hollywood version.
The flowing hair across the prairie, huh?
Yeah.
Bill?
Oh, there is the small
Mhm.
version of the territorial sheriff, which is actually called the ranger, and then that was the gold medal I won at the CA show.
Wonderful. And how big is that piece compared to the monument?
That piece is about 18 inches tall.
Nice. Did you do multiple castings of that, or
I
was
did, there's an addition of 25 to that, and gosh, I mean, I was so surprised. I won sculpture for sculpture, and I also won the Best of Show award at that period of time, so that was really a big deal for me.
Mhm. And where was that again?
At the Cowboy Arts of America show, at the Phoenix Art Museum.
Mhm.
Yes, this piece is out of a white marble that comes from Turkey, and I get my stones from all over the world. And the idea is this, the fox has been up to stuff all night long, and he needs to take a break. He's resting in a bed of oak leaves. As you can see, he's still alert, you know, but he's got a place to hunker down and set for a while. This piece also is going to the Idle George show as part of the Quest for the West. And the reason there's so many of them in this is because it takes me a while to get pieces together for a major show like this.
Mhm. And that one's titled Lying Awake?
Lying low.
Lying Low. Cute. Bill, tell us about this one.
Oh, this is a piece that I personally feel will probably be my signature piece during my lifetime, maybe. I guess it represents the thing that I love the most with the cowboy way of life. It's a typical thing you see on ranches all around the countryside, you know, wherever you go. Early morning, waiting for horses. Guy's got his saddle on his hip and his bridle over his arm, and the wind's kind of cold. He's got a jacket on. And, this is one of the few pieces my wife actually came up with a title that I created a sculpture for. And she said, you ought to make a guy and call it The Legend Lives. Because you hear throughout, you know, the cowboy way of life is dying off. Cowboys are a dying breed. And, you know, this guy's a living legend at a period of time. So that piece is in probably more museums than probably any other of my pieces of work.
Wonderful.
So I'm pretty proud of that one.
Is that up at the Fippen Museum?
That is not at the Fippen Museum. I wish one more. I wish we had one there.
Mm. And would you say that that's probably your favorite sculpture?
I have a hard time with favorite ones. It is absolutely at least one of them. I mean, every time I don't know about any other artist, but a lot of times you create a piece and within a year or two you look at it and you think, I wish I would have done this or changed this a little bit or moved that around a little bit or something of this nature, you know. But he's one that I look at quite often, I mean, whenever I see pictures or scene, and I'm still pretty happy about the way it came out.
Say something about what Bill was saying about, you know, looking back on your pieces and changing them. It works really well for guys who work in bronze, but it don't work so well for stone guys. Because when we start carving them, they get down to a certain size, that's just about it. This piece is one of 10 pieces that I've been larger-than-life pieces for a tribe in Northern California, Yochadihi. Means the people from the springs. And this is a father and son fishing. And in the stream there used to be a lot of salmon. And they would take the willows and weave these new baskets every time so that it was soft enough they could lay it in the stream and the fish would go in and they wouldn't feel anything and then be able to slide right in. But you couldn't keep them from one time to the next because they'd start to get hard. So every time the guy would have to make a new basket. And one of my fun things was trying to learn how those things were knotted together so I could kind of show it in the stone.
Did you make a basket?
No, actually I just carved it directly in the stone.
I think you should make the basket. About how big is that piece?
It's about 5.5 feet tall.
Mm. And where is that?
This is in, yeah, it's in Brooks, California.
And this one is one of my favorite Nebeker pieces. I think anybody that's ever known a hunter can appreciate this one. Tell us about it, Bill.
Yeah, this I grew up, of course, as a hunter, and Doug is too. My whole family hunted. We processed our own game, ate a lot of game, game meat. It was just part of our life, way of life. And of course, everybody that hunts has hunting stories. You hear hunting stories, you tell hunting stories. And I don't know how many times I've been on one side of a canyon and look across to the other side, and you see somebody that's hiking down the ridge with a rifle over their shoulder, and there'll be a big old buck laying underneath the bush, and I'll just quietly laying there watching some guy walk off down the hill. And I didn't know how to create that in something with a sculpture, because it isn't one side of the canyon to another, or one side of the ridge to another. And I thought about this idea for a long time. So I finally came up with an idea to where I had this guy, and he's got binoculars in his hand, and he's sitting down, and he's very diligently trying to find this buck. And his horse, of course, is standing behind him. And when I first made the piece, the rock is undercut, the base is undercut, and I had this buck laying down. Because also when big bucks, a lot of times when people will jump deer, the little deer bound off away and people start shooting at them, but the big buck will lay down, or he'll sneak up and crawl on his knees. They'll actually sneak away. So I had this buck laying down under this cut, and it worked. I mean, it was okay, but it just wasn't all that exciting to me. So I happened to be thumbing through an old hunting magazine, and there, at the end of the story, was a little thumbnail photograph of a deer that was sneaking. And I thought, oh, that's what I've got to do. So I changed the deer from laying down to where he's sneaking away. And of course, that tied in with the horse looking at him. And the title of the piece is If Horses Could Talk. And I was happy with the piece. It was fun to do because I'm a hunter and I stuff. And this was a new piece I made for the CA show. And I sold a whole edition of 25 on that night of the show. It was probably the most popular piece I have ever done.
I can see why. It's very beautiful.
People who hunt loved it because they had had things happen like that to them or seen it. People who don't hunt loved it because the deer was sneaking, getting away. I mean, it just appeased to everybody, I guess.
And I have to tell you, I think probably for me, the most intriguing part of your sculptures are the horses. You often have horses in your sculptures, and you seem to capture the essence or the whimsical nature of horses, the intelligence of them in your pieces. You can definitely see that they're not just a dumb animal, that they're always thinking and they're always reacting to whoever they're with, and that comes through in your sculptures.
Right, I do have several pieces that are of a whimsical nature, that have a little humor.
Horse Thief is
Horse Thief.
it's in the museum, and one of my favorites. Just love that one. I can almost see the smile on the horse's face. I personally like this in bronze. That was the title wall piece for Cultural Connections. So tell us about Honor Song, Doug.
Well, Honor Song is about Native veterans, and to start out, all the powwows, we honor the veterans. And as you can see, the stars and stripes blanket that kind of wraps around all the people, and even the drummer's drum has stars on it. And this is well, partially I do a lot of veteran things, and being a veteran from Vietnam. This piece also was one of my very favorite pieces. Luckily I know the people that have it. It went to a really nice home, and it will be part of my retrospective at the Joy Museum this September.
Would you say that this is your favorite piece, or do you have a favorite piece?
It's always the one I'm working on. It is, because you have to let go of them. You're emotionally, you have to let go of the things you just finished, so that you can put your energy into the next one.
And anybody that lives in Prescott knows this one. But Bill, you were telling us some interesting stuff about this one earlier. Tell us about early
Well, this is my very first attempt at doing monumental sculpture, and it was done by the city of Prescott. They had put together a group called the Prescott Fine Art Fest, and they had decided that they wanted to do some public art because we have the famous statue of Bucky O'Neill done by Solon Borglum, who was a very early famous sculptor, and his brother was world-renowned. He did Mount Rushmore and different ones, and so they had opened up this contest to all artists in Yavapai County, and they made it very difficult for us. Instead of just saying, we want this, and see what you come up with, they said, we want you to depict who you feel was the important people to the development of Prescott, Arizona. So golly, now you had to sit there and think of all these ideas and all types of things. And of course, historically, the reason the white man came here in the first place was because a mountain man, Joseph Redford Walker, brought a group of miners looking for gold. And of course, they found gold here in Prescott, in Lynx Creek and Granite Creek. All the creeks had gold in it. So the miners were the ones that actually started here first. And of course, they kept running. They needed supplies. So on the opposite side of the piece is a figure of, there's a wagon wheel, a symbolic wagon wheel, and a freighter. And the freight started coming in from California. And freight wagon trails, they started building roads and trails in. And of course, then the rancher came and the pioneer woman. And my dad's first, what he said to me first when I got my idea to put it together was, he said, you have to put a pioneer woman in this piece, you know. I had actually thought of maybe putting a soldier, cavalryman in the group, but they weren't really part of living here. They were here more as a protective thing from Port Whipple type of thing. But anyhow, this was an extremely difficult job for me to do because we did the piece in a very small version, 12-inch figures, and trying to create a monumental size from 9-foot figures, from 12-inch figures. You have all kinds of problems because a very small mistake magnifies into a huge mistake. So there wasn't a foundry in this town that could do a piece this big. I had to go to Loveland, Colorado to a foundry up there. I left the 1st of January and I never got home until Easter. And I had to totally re-sculpt every figure in clay to the size because of proportional problems.
For instance, you were saying the hat brim was...
Yeah, you have a hat brim on the cowboy or the miner that, a little 12-inch figure, it looked perfectly fine, but by the time you make it into 9 feet wide, the hat brim was about 3 inches thick. So it was all kinds, it was quite an education for me. And of course, my prize for winning was $10,000. That's what I got for doing this piece.
Negative income.
Negative income, yeah. But it was a very, very great honor to do it for the city of Prescott.
Absolutely, and it is the entry point to our town. Everybody
Yes,
who
it
comes
certainly
in
is.
sees it. Doug, tell us about this one. This is just a beautiful, beautiful piece.
This is a Pueblo lady, and she's carved out of one piece of black steatite, the stone that comes from Virginia. This piece is kind of symbolic of the Southwest, I would say. And she's sitting on a stacked stone wall. And there's pots from several different tribes. There's Zuni and Santa Domingo, Santa Clara, and Zia. And this particular piece is going to the Brook Green Gardens in South Carolina, which is the most famous sculpture repository in the United States. I mean, sculptures from the World's Fair. It is really an extreme honor to get a piece into this collection.
Congratulations. You certainly deserve to be there, but what a beautiful addition this will be. Just amazing. Question, are the pots separate or are they actually attached?
They're all attached.
They're all attached. Oh, and what's the total height of that?
She's about 5 feet tall, and it's 5 feet by 4 feet by 4.5 feet.
Wow. She's a heavy girl.
Oh, I don't recognize that guy. That is actually a picture of me, and that is the small maquette of the Prescott, early Prescott settlers when I did it in clay. It's the small figures. And that's a young guy with a darker colored mustache
And a much lighter big hat.
and a light big hat on, yeah.
And then talking about monumental sculptures, Doug, this is Navajo Code Talker.
Yeah, this is the sculpture I did. It's called the Tribute to the Navajo Code Talker. And the idea was to do a young boy with a flute who was watching his sheep, and during World War II, when they were gathering up volunteers on the reservation to be part of the code talkers for the Marines, a lot of these guys were, actually that's what they were doing, tending their sheep, and this is kind of an idea that we have a lot of the code talkers actually came for the dedication of this, and as a veteran myself, I thought it was very important to show where they came from. There's a lot of war memorials showing everybody in their gear, but very few that express the feelings of what somebody was before they went. This piece actually it took me a little over a year and a half to do. It was my very first commission. The Herd Museum actually recommended me for this honor, and suggested that maybe we should honor the code talkers. This was completed in 1988.
And where is this sculpture?
This sculpture is at Central and Thomas in downtown Phoenix.
Beautiful. And the miniature of this one is on display in the museum here.
Yes,
Part of this.
the maquette's here at the museum.
I have a question too for Doug. A lot of people hear of the word Navajo code talkers, which there were many of them, but there also were code talkers from all different tribes.
Yeah.
All different tribes, Comanche, Crow, Sioux. I mean, there were
Yes,
code
yes.
talkers from a lot of different tribes.
Mhm.
Yeah. But since this was basically to be an honor for Arizona Indian veterans, the code talkers, and the thing was that the code talkers weren't allowed to accept any honors or even have that exposure of what they did for a long, long time. So this was really well overdue.
Mhm.
That's great.
Have you done any work with veterans, Veterans Administration? Have you ever?
Not with the Veterans Administration. I work with, I have a 20-foot high piece in Yuma that I did for the veterans there of an eagle that sort of it's flying and then all the emblems around on the front side of it. And usually, what I try to do is for that one, I didn't accept any money for it. I just used all the resources they had to decide how big it could be. So.
Well, thank you for your service.
Absolutely.
And there's Motley Crue.
Yeah, this is one of my early years when I first became a member of the Cowboy Arts of America, which is kind of a great honor for me because George Phippen, who was the founding president of the group, was kind of not a mentor to me, but he was my hero in a sense. I mean, he is the man, his work is the one that inspired me to try to do art. To take all this energy I had in making things, I actually saw something that I wanted to try to do. And he was one of the founding members of the group, and there are only two living founders still in that group, was Johnny Hampton and Joe Beeler. But there was a very young guy with a, you can see I had a black hat on him, and during that period of time, I was one of the few guys that had a black hat. Later on, you see a lot more of them on there, but this was a huge honor. The man who inspired me to try to do work, which I very am sad I never ever got to meet George Fickman. I went to school with the kids, and I got to meet all the rest of the family and work for the family in a little foundry there for several years. Never did get to meet George. I was way too shy to go up to him. And then I became, a member of the group that he was involved in starting. So.
What year was this photo taken, Bill?
I don't know. Tell us what.
1980.
1980. Okay, I know someone there. I became a member in 1978, and my very first show was 1979. So this was the second year. This was 1980.
Do you think that that was a turning point in your career?
Oh, becoming a cowboy artist in America? Oh, absolutely.
And Doug, do you think that there was a specific moment in your career that you would call the turning point?
Probably 1973, Indian Market in Santa Fe. I won the sculpture award, but more importantly, I had taken that sculpture that week into Forrest Finn's gallery, which I consider one of the best galleries in Santa Fe, and showed it to him, and he kind of dismissed me and said he didn't handle living artists. So, not to be dissuaded from my original idea that I wanted to be in the gallery, after I got all the awards, I took the piece early Saturday morning into his gallery with all my ribbons, and he said, well, all right, we'll just keep it for the weekend. And before I got home, I got a call saying that he wanted me to go back to the gallery. And I thought, well, I changed his mind, right? But when I got back there, a group from the West Texas Museum in Lubbock had purchased the piece. And during the conversation, they were talking to me about all kinds of things, and they came up, did I have any more sculptures? And I said, I have 5 or 6 at my studio. And Mr. Finn did his leap of faith and jumped in between us and told me to bring my sculptures in. And for the next 26 years, every Indian market, I had a one-man show there.
Nice.
No, that's
Nice.
great.
Great story.
This is my bronze of Chief Joseph. Chief Joseph was not only the head of was one of the leaders of the Nez Perce tribe, but he's probably the most recognized member of the Nez Perce tribe. And when I did the sculpture, originally, of course, it was done in clay. I've been lucky enough to have this piece at the Smithsonian. It's one of 2 pieces I have there. He's 10.5 feet tall. There's also a copy of him here on loan at the Fippen Museum.
Just beautiful. So Chief Joseph is more than just an image to you. He is part of your cultural background as well.
Right. And when I finished him, I took him up to Idaho to show the tribe. And the really interesting thing, one of the young guys that he also worked for the national park, and he knows everything about everything according to him. And so he's checking this piece out, and he after he gets done examining it, he comes over to me and he says, well, I see he's got the butt plate still on the rifle. And I said, yeah, he didn't take the butt plate off. He said, well, they always took the butt plates off and they use them for scrapers, for the hides. And I said, yeah, but he didn't take his off there. He said, okay, all right. And he goes around him a couple more times and he comes back and he says, well, you have the serial number on his gun. So I said, yeah, it got me there. I don't know the serial number. But he could rattle off the serial number. So I guess, other than that, I got his approval.
Magnificent. And that one, as you said, is at Fippen. You can drive by the Fippen at any time and see that beautiful work out there.
And a very interesting part, too, with Chief Joseph was they really equipped the cavalry in several fights in his trek headed to Canada. So they were a very, very proud fighting people. And they did an amazing feat.
And he's also probably one of the most quoted Native American leaders in our country. So many times you see quotes and they are from Chief Joseph.
Absolutely.
Here's a little flashback in time. Tell us who this is, Bill.
These are non-Native Americans.
These are non-Native Americans, yes. These are Smoki.
My family, my mom and my dad, especially my dad, were very involved in the Smoki during all the years of Smoki. And my dad was an antelope priest. He was in the snake dance for many, many years. He led. During the snake dance, you had the dancer with the snake, and then the antelope priest had the fan. He would dance and thing. But it was world renowned. I mean, there was people came from all over the world to see this, and I have to honestly say that they did not do this in a negative way. To them, they took it extremely serious. They studied and researched as hard as they possibly could to do everything as correct as possible. They revived a lot of things that were on the point of disappearing. And so it was quite a time here for Prescott. Prescott was renowned for, in August, people came from all over the world to see Smoki dance.
And of course, we're seeing.
And that's my little son, that's my mom, and then that's my boy.
That's your boy. Which one?
The little boy, Travis, that's my one son, then I have two daughters.
And of
It
course,
wasn't too much longer after this that Smoki disbanded.
and we're standing in the Smoki Pueblo, which
And
of
the
course is
Pueblo
their
right here.
practice facilities. And I commented earlier that we still have that dress. That dress is in our archives. Doug, tell us about this one. This is just a great story.
It's an alabaster piece, and it's called Bear Sounds. And as you can see, on one side of the stone is all nice and green, and got these two guys peeking through there. And if you look on the back side of it, there's the two guys peeking through the trees there, and then one guy sitting there making these bear sounds. But what you really don't know is that this is at the girls' swimming hole. And they're trying to chase the girls out of the water.
For any of us that grew up around the lake, can relate to that one. That's just a great piece. So the stone, when you found it, did it have that green face on it?
Yes. That's half the fun for me working with stone is that all the stones are so different, and that this particular quarry up in Utah that I would get this stone from, that green and brown was so, it suggested so many things. If you could just imagine this, if I tilted it the other way, and the bottom part of it's all green, and then the top part's brown, I did these women all in these berry bushes picking berries, and then I scraped all their dresses and stuff, so it kind of turned their dresses all white, so you have all this really beautiful thing with all these bushes in green and the women all in brown picking these berries that were all over the whole sculpture.
Wow. Beautiful.
The stone really suggests lots of things.
Yes.
Well, this was another major turning point in my career. I was just a young guy getting started. I was not a member of the Cowboy Artists at this period of time. I was doing work, and I had been accepted into a gallery in Scottsdale. And actually, I had, of course, being a cowboy type, I loved Western movies. Still to this day, I watch old movies on TV and everything. I always admired John Wayne's version of The Searchers. He was a hard-bitten man back from the Civil War. And of course, John Ford films are kind of a classic. They're almost like a painting. The views he has coming and going reminds you a lot of paintings. And I admired John Wayne because he was a man of his word. He spoke his mind whether it was a popular view or not. And back during this period of time, this was in like 70, 71, the Vietnam War was going strong, and there were so many anti-people that were so anti-Vietnam, everything. It was two different sides of factions, people who thought we should be there, people who didn't want us there. But it was not a very popular thing to be outspoken about being for Vietnam. And I thought for a man to put his career on the line to support the troops, he didn't so much support the war as he supported the men and women that were there. And plus, I just loved his films. This film had, at the John Ford film, it started with, of course, Sons of the Pioneer music, and it was a black screen and a little door open to a cabin from a black to an open, and then he's riding across the sand dunes coming home from the Civil War. Well, after the entire movie is over, after he searches for this girl for all these years, little grandchild that was stolen, everybody is coming back home in through the door of the cabin, and he's left standing all by himself, silhouetted in this doorway, and the wind was blowing his hat up in the back, and dust was kind of swirling, and he was holding his arm, and he kind of turned slowly and walked off, and the door slowly closed at the end of the scene. Well, that scene of that doorway just fascinated me to no end. And of course, during this period of time, we didn't have VCR machines or tapes to rent to look at films. You either saw a rerun on television, or there was a rerun at the movie theater. So I found a book that had a few pictures of John Wayne from the Searchers that I could see what dress he wore, what kind of outfit he had. But there was not a picture of that scene. So I did it from memory. And I made this piece, and he was standing there holding his arm. And I had read where when he said when he died, he wanted to be remembered by a Spanish quotation. Feo fuerte y formal. He was ugly, strong, and had dignity. And that is actually on his tombstone. And so I made a piece, a tribute to John Wayne. I put John Wayne, feo fuerte y formal. Never gave it a thought about anything ever happening with it or whatever was going to, And my wife's father was on a school board in Sun City. And at that time it was a school that was for handicapped children. And he was bragging on his son-in-law, who was doing a statue of John Wayne. And one of the board members piped up and said, well, I'm one of John Wayne's business partners. I want to see this piece. Well, it scared me to death. I mean, oh my gosh. So we took a piece down there, and John Wayne was coming to town, and the business partner took the piece, showed John Wayne. Well, he loved it. He loved it to death. Wanted to meet me. Wanted the piece, ended up buying 2 or 3 other pieces of mine. And we have pictures of us sitting on the tailgate of a pickup truck, drinking coffee in a styrofoam cup, and he is buying artwork from back bed of my pickup. But he was exactly who you think John Wayne would be. He was an enormous man. You can't even see my hand. I mean, I'm shaking hands with him, and it was like shaking hands with a side of beef. I mean, it was just an enormous guy. But he asked me a question. He said, why did you particularly choose this scene? And I said, well, I just loved the movie The Searchers, and that scene in the doorway stuck with me my whole life. And I said, I just wanted to try to do that. He said, well, I have to tell you a story. He said, this was a turning point in my career. He said, while I was making this film, he said, his hero was an older star whose name was Harry Carey Sr. And Harry Carey's son, Harry Carey Jr., was in a lot of John Wayne films. But Harry Carey Sr. had a habit of holding his arm when he was in scenes talking to people. And Olive Carey, the wife, she was the woman, the pioneer woman that was in The Searchers, who was married to the little Swedish man. And he bragged about his wife, by golly, she was a school teacher. And he said, I was complaining while I was making this film. I was doing a lot of belly aching about being typecast. I'm kind of stuck in a rut. I've got this image people see me in, and people I'm coming up through the business with, they're spreading out and doing different things. He said, Olive Carey took him aside one day and said, listen, how would you like it if you went to see a film of Harry being a murderer or a thief or a rapist or some unsavory character? He said, well, boy, I wouldn't like that at all. She said, that's absolutely right, and the people that love you won't want to see you do that either. So he said, it really made me sit back and think. So he said, at the end of the film, while she's watching the filming, when I was in the door, standing in the doorway, I reached over and held my arm like her husband did in his films to tell her, I hear what you're saying and I agree. And he said she started crying. So he said, that was a huge turning point in my life, and you captured it unbeknownst to,
Without even knowing it.
without even knowing.
Cool. It's a great story.
So that was a huge thing for us. That was a great deal.
Okay. Do you know where that statue is now?
It is in the Cowboy Hall of Fame up in Oklahoma City. He donated it there. Of course, he had a very large art collection. He had quite a few sculptures. He had a lot of Harry Jackson's work. But in the movie star section in the museum in Oklahoma City, it has several of John Wayne's artifacts, and there, standing there, is that statue
Nice.
that I made.
Very nice. Cool. Great story. Doug, tell us about this one.
This is Agua Caliente Women. This is downtown Palm Springs. The city was commissioning some artists to do a piece to honor the Agua Caliente, who are Kauai Indians, who their band actually is in the downtown Palm Springs around the hot springs. It was the city, when they first put out their notice that they wanted to do this sculpture, they forgot to put in there what their budget was. And so all these people, that over 600 artists from all across the country, submitted these multi-million-dollar sculpture ideas to them. After they realized that they forgot that part, they canceled the program, right? And they sent it out again the second time, and this time they put their budget was like $141,000. And that got rid of about 500 artists. So anyway, it gets down to there's 5 of us that are chosen to do the maquettes, the models of the what our ideas were. And the other artists portrayed a single figure, and they had these long flowing hair, these dramatic poses that looked like Gone from the Wind kind of things, and I tried to show more of the culture, and the acorns in the ladies' baskets, and the hoyo, and other traditional type things, and they also had some tribal members on the selection committee, and they asked me, well, why does that lady have her hair in a bandana? And I said, well, I know from my research that when tribal members pass, the other ones the other ladies will cut their hair, and so she's still in mourning, and she's got her hair wrapped up in a bandana. And I was awarded the commission because I took the time to learn more about their people. And the other thing that was really interesting about this was when they actually did the unveiling, the tribal leaders I was standing next to them, they hadn't seen the finished piece. And oh my God, they had television cameras and all the governor and all these Hollywood lights and streets blocked off, and I was fit to be tied because nobody had really seen it, nobody had any reaction. I mean, I couldn't tell what's going to happen. They had told me, well, we won't tell you what we like, we'll tell you what we don't like. That was, that was my only. So when they pull the parachute off and the piece is standing there in the middle of the street, the tribal leaders come over and said, we like it. And then they asked me to get up and say a few words, and I said, thank you, and sat down.
Final question. Are you working with or have you been around any of the young artists that you feel like are up and coming, that they're going to be the next great artist on the forefront, next great sculptor on the forefront?
Sculptors. You know, I really don't know because there's, like in every group, there's a generation gap, and a lot of the ideas and things now are technically drawn. I mean, technically, people are using a lot more imagery and more abstract. I'm from the figurative type of sculptors. You know, I think I need to see the figure to get the feel of it, and some of the new things I just don't get, including my son's work. He has to explain quite a bit of it to me. So I mean, it's kind of hard. But there are actually a lot of guys who do still very figurative work. I'm just talking about the next generation and more into the future. But I judge a lot of the native shows all across the country and get to see the progress in different areas. And I think that people, in museums especially now, are evolving to, they're not so much interested in collecting the old pottery, old sculptors' work. They want the new guys' work, the things that are going to be part of the future. The new museum in Washington, D.C., honoring the Native people, is primarily very modern type pieces that they're collecting. So I'm just sort of the older generation now.
Interesting position to find yourself in.
Yeah, well, I'm an elder now.
Yeah.
You're supposed to listen to me.
You're supposed to. Bill, who do you see up there?
Well, I'm not elder, I'm just older. As you can tell, I was the young guy in the group, and now I'm down to get towards the older phase of the group. But constantly on the outlook, always looking at art, always trying to look at, and there's some younger people coming along that I see that I like to work. There are just an awful lot of artists in today's world compared to what it was when we started. Gosh, I started at a time when there wasn't that many artists around, really. Now there's artists everywhere.
Like this picture?
Yeah, see, that's my early years of, in fact, that's another very interesting story to talk about because George Phippen was trying to do sculpture along with being a painter. He wanted to, you couldn't find a foundry. I mean, as many years as there was, it had kind of disappeared. Roman bronze was a famous foundry in New York City where Remington and Russell did their castings. They no longer cast fine art. Foundries had kind of disappeared. So there was a man named Joe Noggle and artist George Phippen and another man named Joe Vest started the very first bronze foundry in Prescott. It was called Noggle Bronze, and it was up by the Charlotte Hall Museum. And they were learning trial and error how to do castings. And they had terrible times with losing things and things burning up, whatever. It was tough time. The books were so generalized that things that you tried would not work. So George later went down, he had a little ranch down in Squaw Valley, Arizona, and they started another little foundry down there called Bear Paw Bronze. And when I was trying to learn how to do some sculpture, my wife and I loaded my stuff up in the car and we drove to Squaw Valley, Arizona to where the Phippens lived. They had this little foundry going down there and wanted to get Mrs. Phippen's advice. Well, they were very kind to me about my work I was trying to do, but they did offer me a job to work with Ernie Phippen and learn to do bronze casting. So I left a $2 an hour job in the Forest Service, and I went to work for the Phippen family for $1.50 an hour. And we learned by trial and error to do bronze casting, and I'm the one kneeling down there, and this is Ernie Phippen, and we're cleaning off a casting, and they never even had ceramic shell casting at that time, which is what everybody uses now. This was the old investment style casting where if you had a piece this big, you had a plaster mold this big. So it was completely different. But it was a real education, and I was in seventh heaven. I would work all day at the foundry, and I would go home, and I would sit at a little kitchen table, and I would work on my sculpture till 1 or 2 in the morning.
Doug, has technology changed in stone sculpture?
Well, if you're talking from Michelangelo's time, yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of diamond tools, carbide, so we can work on harder materials, and lots of grinding equipment. One of the things that happened for me was after I got out of the Army, I got a job in northern Idaho making tombstones, which was really a very educational job for me. Not only because I had to work with granite, but I learned how to work with the harder materials, sandblasters and saws, and I used my GI Bill, and I made fantastic monuments. People would come to their place because I could do portraits, and I could do lots of other things that people weren't even doing. I could draw, and I could cut out people's farms, and have that in the background, and all this kind of stuff. And the guy was a logger, I could do a logging truck on there. And the last survivor of the Nez Perce Wars was a fellow by the name of Josiah Red Wolf. And I did a Pendleton blanket design in the back of his, and a portrait of him on his gravestone, which is at the Nez Perce Historical Park in Idaho. And after I got fairly good at it, I got a call from Santa Fe asking me if I wanted to come down and teach. And so I quit well, actually while I was there, I made 10 sculptures of my own. And I had a show at the Northern Plains Museum in Browning, Montana, and I sold everything. And so I was already ready to quit the tombstone business.
Well, I guess those people can't run around and brag about having a Hyde tombstone.
Well, I didn't sign it because their names were supposed to be
Their
on
names
it.
were on the record.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say about your careers in retrospect?
Well, one thing that's wonderful about it is all the great people you get to meet. Doug and I became very good friends. I mean, we haven't known each other forever and a day, but when we met, we just kind of gone together and have become very good friends. And it's such a wonderful business to be in. And the people you get to meet, and the places you get to go, and the museums you get to see, and all the other artwork that you get to see and become acquainted with. It's been a wonderful life.
Wonderful life.
I was thinking that, Bill. And the other thing is, when you really start getting good at it, then you start thinking, well, I only got another 40 years of hard carving left. Can't take these afternoons off and sit here.
Yeah, wow. Well, on behalf of the Smoki Museum, the Board of Trustees, volunteers, members, staff, I want to thank you both for bringing your sculptures to life in the Smoki Museum. It's been one of our most successful exhibits ever, and we cannot thank you enough. So, Cultural Connections, Cowboys and Indians in Sculpture. Nebeker and Hyde. Thank you.